Greetings, citizens. Today is of course perfect, but today is an even more perfect day, because today we rediscovered our favourite RPG, Paranoia 2nd Edition, the perfect role-playing game. And here it is, citizens. 1987 copy, Paranoia 2nd Edition. And if we look on the back, we zoom in and then forward on the 2nd edition, it will say the 1st edition of Paranoia is perfect and without flaw in every respect. The computer says so. The computer also says that the 2nd edition of the game is even more perfect. So there you have it. This is indeed the perfect game. But what makes Paranoia the perfect RPG? After all, if you have any knowledge of RPGs, then you will know that Paranoia is a parody game. It parodies all those other, more serious, lesser RPGs out there. Both past, present, and future yet to come. But what makes it perfect? The main thing that makes it perfect, or joking aside, a very good game, is that it highlights so many features of regular role-playing games within its rather humorous comedic tones. In Paranoia, the GM is encouraged to be that absolute caricature of the awful GM, the one who railroads you everywhere, the one who puts story and NPCs first above the players. The players are just there along for the ride to view whatever horrible situation the Game Master dumps them into. The players are greedy, conniving, opportunistic mer-hobos with no ties to anyone, for they are clones. They have no parents. They have no relatives, no descendants. They have been decanted out of a tank into the mad dystopian world of Alpha Complex. There is no connection to anybody else. They are free to go and murder and shoot and blast and disintegrate anyone they feel like, because they have no connection to anybody. And this is perfect. Because this is a parody of, well, all those other role-playing games. A mockery of them. And highlighting what you should not do should you choose to play one of those less perfect games. If your game starts to look like a session of Paranoia, but the GM, for some reason, is holding a copy of Dungeons and Dragons, or Call of Cthulhu, or Savage Worlds in their little hands. If that game looks like a game of Paranoia, then he's doing something wrong. Well, she's doing something wrong. Because Paranoia is a parody. It is there to highlight the errors and common mistakes of other games. But let's delve into the rabbit hole a bit more and see why this is so perfect. First off, we have character generation. The player section of the handbook lasts all of 14 pages. It's not really a game for players. But in there you will find rules for creating your troubleshooter. It takes all of 3 pages for the mechanics of generating the character, and most of that is a description of the service groups and the attributes. Basically, Paranoia 2nd Edition, you take a D20 and you roll it for each of your stats. There are about 10, covering a range of things, like how strong you are, how smart you are, how charming you are, how good you are at understanding mechanical stuff. And there's about 10 of them, because if you're rolling a D20, 10 times, you're going to get some good rolls, you're going to get some bad rolls. And one of the purposes of Paranoia is for the GM to exploit those bad rolls you've made. The other well-known, and then you assign some skill points. The game heartily recommends that you stick 10 points in lasers and then scatter the other remaining 10 points to the winds as you feel. There's no real need to worry about skills. After all, halfway through the game, you're going to be called on to make a repair nuclear reactor skill, or negotiate with ferocious tribesman skill, neither of which you will have. And this will result in you getting murdered horribly. And that's the other well-known facet of the game. You will get murdered horribly. And you'll get murdered horribly 6 times over the course of a single game session. And that's okay. Because Paranoia is usually only good for 1 session at a time for per character. And this parodies those killer GMs out there. Those GMs who love to kill their player characters, to torment the players. It also parodies how death is an incredibly cheap thing to play characters in serious role-playing games where there is not a killer GM. They get killed and then something brings them back. Some random mechanical contrivance in the game, such as a raise dead spell, a resurrection ability, brain taping if you're doing your Car Wars, or even cloning in a science fictional game. In Paranoia, you get 6 clones. The computer has made backup copies of all its troubleshooters, of all its citizens, so that when something unfortunate happens to a clone, or they are found out to be a traitor, there is a new copy there, ready to go. And this helps keeps the action going in the game. Sure, your characters just died. They have been killed by the irate secretary bot because you have not presented the correct form. But that's okay. Your replacement will be along in a couple of minutes. They can pick up the forms, they can fill them out correctly this time, and then get killed for some other reason. Because that's how the game goes. Death is incredibly cheap. It is constantly played for laughs. And yes, you will die. If your GM is anything like me, he will carry a small timer with him. The timer will go off every 5 minutes. If someone has not died in that 5-minute period, then someone will die then. And this means that there is a constant turnover of clones, and that everyone should be 6 times dead over, for 6 people each, by the time the 3-hour mark runs around and it's time for everyone to go home. So, that's characters. The rest of Paranoia's rulebook is of course devoted to the Game Master, and ultimately describes the rules of the game. Briefly, there aren't that many rules in Paranoia. It goes in loving detail on the world that Paranoia is set in, a mad dystopian nightmare ruled by a crazed computer who is insane and sees traitors everywhere and sends the PCs off on missions to hunt down and execute these imagined traitors. The fact that every PC is a traitor, in generally at least 2 ways, means that most adventures are bizarre runarounds, pointless endeavours, where the plot doesn't matter, the NPCs don't matter, and the players will eventually kill each other if the environment doesn't get them first. But we mentioned at the start that Paranoia is a parody. How is this a parody? Well, in regular games, the PCs will go off on some significant quest to do something significant, or they are investigating something. They are struggling to survive in some mad, hostile world that does not care about them, or they are exploring. But often there is purpose and meaning to this. In Paranoia, there is no purpose, there is no meaning. You will die. You will be executed. You will meet a horrible fate. Is this fun? Yes, of course this is fun. This is a parody of the regular games you go on. In other games, you are trying to do things. You are trying to advance your character. You are trying to find out about the world. You are trying to achieve whatever goals the GM has given you. Paranoia, there are no goals. Unless it is be the last one standing. There is no point. It is all just a game. And in Paranoia, the GM is encouraged to be a parody of some of the worst GM types you've ever seen out there. He is encouraged to railroad the plot, to drag the PCs from one location to another, from one horrible scenario he's come up with to the next horrible scenario, and mercilessly kill them. He is encouraged to be a killer GM. He is encouraged to murder the PCs as quickly and as efficiently as possible, often also as tragically. They are encouraged to be a GM who cares only about their own story. It doesn't really matter what the characters are, they're utterly disposable. And it does these things to highlight that when you are playing a different game, that you should not do these things. That you should not railroad. You should, to the degree of a game master in Paranoia, you should give your players freedom of movement, freedom of action, freedom of agency. They should be allowed to choose their own destiny. You shouldn't just murder them willy-nilly. They should be allowed to continue and grow and develop and have character arcs. You can't have a character arc in Paranoia. It's impossible. But in a more serious game, in a game that is not a total parody, you should have character arcs. You should have development. The character's actions should actually mean something. And in a different game, the plot should be a collaborative effort between the players and the GM. Their agency matters. Their effect on the world matters. It has an effect, even if it is to accidentally cause the summoning Cthulhu. Even if it is to be the story of the heroes who unfortunately did failed to stop the wizard from taking over the world. Well, that can be a story too. But in Paranoia, we parody the all-important story GM who lovingly has crafted their story and their world, and the players are just dropped in it and have no idea what's going on, but get to follow along anyway with their little camera, because that's all they need in those GM's worlds. In Paranoia, you get to experience that, but you experience it for laughs. You go, yes, we all get dragged down this other corridor to this other location, and now this NPC is going to try and kill us. It's a parody. It is a joke. The joke is that if your other games are anything like Paranoia, then maybe you need to change. Maybe the game needs to change. Maybe you are doing something wrong. Because if your other game looks like Paranoia, it's got problems. But anyway, Paranoia also has some excellent GMing advice. I'll just look up this section on combat. I've always been impressed with this section, with the combat section, with its advice. It has a brief bit on the idea that that combat should be the dramatic tactical combat system, which is basically the GM says what happens, makes a few rolls, describes the outcome of those actions, and the players describe their actions. And if it's a Paranoia game, they flail around and they make some rolls, and the results of those actions are adjudicated. And then you rinse repeat until everyone is dead. Dramatic tactical combat. There are no miniatures. There are no figures on grids. There are nothing. You don't need any of that. It is fully in favour of the theatre of the mind system. The idea that everything is going on in your heads. That's good advice. Especially since this came out in 1987, where miniatures and grids were starting to really get some traction in other games, if they hadn't already. This was a breath of fresh air, that you just sat down at a table and you yelled and shouted at each other about crazy stuff and threw dice around, because it was still a role-playing game, you still had to do that totally. But this is a game which, in 1987, which is saying, play theatre of the mind, fools. And the rest, it has a good summary of what you should do in combat. Rule 1. Keep the action moving. Make combat fast, furious, deadly, confusing, chaotic. Don't give the players time to think. Too many times in role-playing games you say, Bob, what is your character doing? Bob goes, I don't know. Where am I? And God help you if you're playing on a grid or something. He peers down, tries to pick out which of his figure, looks for his figure, tries to see what's around it, what's going on, and hims and hers, and oh, God help us. 5 minutes later, Bob finally makes the decision on what's to be done. Don't do this. Paranoia explicitly states that if the player can't tell you what their troubleshooter is doing in under 5 seconds, then they stand there differing. And it's okay to stand there differing. It doesn't really matter in Paranoia because, well, you're going to die anyway. Does it really matter if you died because you were performing an action or because you couldn't perform an action? Doesn't really matter. But this is good advice for any other role-playing game. Make combat fast. Make it confusing. Don't give the characters 5 minutes to make their move. Because really, you don't want that in a game. It just drags it out interminably. You'll start dreading combats for the wrong reasons. Because they become long, involved, convoluted affairs where people consult rules. No, do none of that. Make it fast, deadly, confusing. If the rounds are popping along, then it doesn't really matter if your character did it for one round. And as a GM, you should be encouraged to make the NPCs differ occasionally. They're not always going to get things right. They're going to be confused and frightened and weirded out by just, their friend getting stabbed to death by some maniac with their +3 sword. Of course they're going to make mistakes. The players are making mistakes. Make the other players make mistakes. Make the NPCs make mistakes. Make it fair. In Paranoia, you're encouraged not to be fair. But once you start thinking about how to apply these lessons to other games, then you can see how you can make it fair. Don't let the NPCs always pop off and then work as a well-oiled machine. Unless there's something like killer robots who have their program, or hobgoblins who are disciplined and organised. But even then, sometimes even the most disciplined and organised things just go to pieces. Especially in something as chaotic as combat. The third rule. Reward flamboyant and witty thinking. This is one of the few times that the players might actually get something over on a Paranoia GM. If they're entertaining, if they're witty, if they do something wild and crazy and entertaining, then it's encouraged to succeed. And this is something I never saw before in a role-playing game prior to 1987. It was sort of, you had to make your roll to consider the realness about the situation and work out whether it would make sense and make some dreaded rolls. When, if the character did something wild and amazing and incredible that there was no real rule for, such as we're fighting the griffins, I sneak behind and with my telekinetic hand spell, I goose it. I take my telekinetic hand and I shove it where the sun doesn't shine up the griffin. Are there any rules for that in any role-playing you have seen? And don't say fatal. Please, do not say fatal. Any actual role-playing game. There are no rules for goosing a griffin in any role-playing game. Yet as a GM, you're encouraged to come up with an effect. I'm pretty sure most of you can imagine what happens to a griffin that gets goosed. But you're encouraged to reward that. Make it a good effect. The players come up with a clever reaction to a dire situation. Reward them for it. That's awesome advice for any game. And it's here in Paranoia. In the game, which is a parody. Rule 4. Kill the bastards! Combat should be dangerous. Combat should be deadly. If you go into a combat, there is a good chance that you will die, that your character will get killed. Of course, in Paranoia, you dial this up to 11. You are going to die. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, or how soon, or how messily. Will you get vaporized? Will you be smeared across the entire room? Will they not find any bit light? Will they be able to take you back in a matchbox? But in a more serious game, you should still have your combats be deadly and dangerous and frightening. The threat of death should be real. It shouldn't be, we will lose 25% of our hit points because that's what a standard encounter says we should. No, you should possibly lose all your hit points and all your buddies' hit points. Or if you're playing some game, you might just get killed. You might just get destroyed. You might get staked and left out for the sunrise. Combats should be deadly. That is why it's dangerous. That's why people don't willingly go into it. That's why armies invest so much time and training to condition people to do it. Because really, it's frightening, deadly, and getting killed is bad. Rule 5. Above all else, keep the action moving. Imploring you to keep the action moving. Keep things going. Don't get bogged down in rules. Don't let it stop and pause. Make it... Each round should go around quickly. Bang, 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 bang. Boom, you're dead. Bang, bang, bang. Boom, you're dead. Bang. Or they're all dead. Now let's move on. Let's get back to whatever crazy, convoluted, mad, dystopian run around we are indulging in. Combat is over. We now go back to the next bit. And that is Paranoia Combat. And the rest of the rules, the Game Master section, goes on, dispensing excellent game mastering advice. Of course, the advice to be this terrible, railroady, story-first, NPCs matter, the PCs are irrelevant, killer GM mode. The Paranoia rulebook gives you some excellent advice on how to emulate this, and how to do it in an entertaining and amusing manner so that everyone at the table does have a good time. But as it's doing this, it's also telling you how to do things right, so that when you sit down with your regular game, whatever that game may be, that you do things better, that you do not look like a paranoia GM when you were playing your Cthulhu game, when you were playing your Dungeons and Dragons, when you were getting some riffs on. Though maybe in riffs you should go for a bit more killer, because goddamn, Griff was deadly. But in any event, it gives you advice on how to do this. It gives you advice on how to manage information. In Paranoia, you are encouraged to be exceptionally stingy with information. You're not supposed to give out any information. Should the PCs ask anything, the ritual phrase is, "I'm sorry, that information is not available at your security clearance." Or, "What is your security clearance, citizen?" And when the player says red friend computer or orange friend computer or whatever colour they come up with, the computer then goes, "I am sorry, that information is not available at your security clearance. Happy to be of service." Of course, you should not do this in a regular game. You should give out information to players freely, wildly, madly, because the players are deaf, dumb and blind without input from the GM, without information about the world. They can't see the medieval city. They can't see the starport. They can't see the perpetually raining, grimy, gothic punk streets where the vampires are hiding out in. They can only see it if you describe it to them. They can only experience these things if you tell them what's going on. So, in a regular game, give out information as freely as possible, because then the players get to act on it. They get to know about things. It is the strict reverse of what Paranoia encourages you to do. But then, in Paranoia, the joke's on all of us. You're playing the mean, nasty, mean spirit, silly, Viking hat, killer GM that you should never be in your regular game. Paranoia is a game for everyone to kick back and relax. The players get to kick back and relax because death doesn't matter. They've got another clone. They'll be back. The GM gets to kick back and relax because They don't have to worry about whether they're being a bad GM or not. They're supposed to be the bad GM. They are the most awful GM in the world. They get to play that character. The horrible, horrible, horrible GM that you have had to suffer interminably through as people fumble their way to become a GM. You get to be them. You get to play them. And it's fun. It is an awful lot of fun. And people constantly enjoy dealing with this awful GM when they know that everyone, the game master, the players, are all in on the joke. That is the magical, perfect mode of Paranoia. You are having fun. You are playing the bad players. Because your players have no ties. They have no connections. I pointed this out earlier. There is no connection between any other character. You are all going to be in a different service group. You are all going to have weird mutant powers. You're all going to be a mutant, and you get promoted if you can capture and kill and execute a mutant. And everyone in your party is a mutant. If you can expose them, if you can bring them to justice, if you can get them executed for being a mutant, you get promoted. So for that alone, the other players are going to want to PvP your ass. And then you're all members of secret societies. You are all traitors. You are all conspiring to bring about the computer's downfall. You are the bad guys. You are the villains. And everyone at the table will know this. They will be trying to expose you as a traitor while trying to keep them, trying to keep their own character not being exposed. Because this is a futile event. You will get exposed. You will get executed. You will get captured. You will get tortured to death. This will happen. And you are encouraged to be this nasty, infighting, backstabbing party that passes notes, that you get to be that player who has the deep, dark secret and keeps it to themselves. And they are so clever because they're the traitor and they're going to betray the entire party. But the joke is on you, the joke is on them. You're all that player. You're all conniving, sneaking, backstabby murder hobos on an adventure with the worst GM in the world. And that is Paranoia. That is why the game is so perfect. Why it is an amazing parody, and why it is such a blast to play. And why even, I think only 1 hour after I discovered this book, and the time it took me to make this silly rambling video, I've already got people clamoring to play Paranoia already. That's how popular it is. That's how much fun it is. If you can find a copy, get it, read through it, learn from it, and then play it. Play a character. Play the horrible murder hobo backstabby PC. Play the terrible, terrible game master, and have a blast doing it. Thank you. This has been William Dymock-Johnson. Over and out.